included in that was a major medical insurance program. Now, what collective measurement methods other than the competition of insurance companies for patients and of physicians for service would be necessary to make that an efficient operating system?
Well, I can think of several. One is to do with the definition of the contract. Health insurance contracts are extremely complex. I think many people who write about health policy fail to understand that. They don't know what's in their own policy, for example. You know,
nobody ever reads his automobile policy either.
Right, and health insurance policies are much, much more complex. And I think that...
Have you recently read your automobile insurance policy through?
No.
Well, then be careful.
No, okay, you mean that they're pretty bad too. All right, and in fact, I think that even a very intelligent individual is not going to be in a good position to judge is this a good policy or not. There are problems of air pockets. I chair the Health Benefits Advisory Council for the state employees, and we have 27 different competing health plans, and recently we have decided that we will standardize on one single contract. And one of the main reasons for that is so that we could understand the contract. And in the process of standardization, we found things like Plan A covers transplants, including the cost of harvesting and transporting the organ. Plan B in the bold print says we cover transplants too, but in the fine print it says, but we don't cover the cost of harvesting and transplanting the organ. So somebody in the middle of the night suddenly, you know, never thought about that, suddenly finds, you know, my coverage failed me when I needed it. So I think we need some, now I'm not saying the government, I'm looking for some other way of doing this, but we need some collective agency that will...
You mean like the Consumers Union?
Or spread risk. So, well, what's the proposal I've been making this year I call a health insurance purchasing cooperative. Imagine that all the small employers and self-employed, and maybe even the large employers in a given area like San Mateo County, got together and said, we will create locally here, a collective purchasing agency. We will, with a board of directors that responds to the members, we will put on our expertise to figure out what is a good contract, what's economical but protects people and so forth. And then we'll put that out to bid, and different health plans will offer their system and style of care to meet that contract, and we'll offer all the people a choice, and people will make a cost-conscious choice. Everybody has to pay more.
If that is a desirable thing,
yeah,
why won't it emerge in a market system? Why do you have to have...
good question. Very good question, for which I have a lot of respect.
And hold on.
Yeah.
In a market system in which the individual health recipients are the buyers of health services and not the employers.
It's the risk spreading aspect. That is, market forces are unfortunately centrifugal with respect to risk sharing. That is, the healthy young groups, or the people who are healthy this year, say we don't want to be pooled with this other group that is having higher costs.
Well, fine. Why should they be?
Well,
why should they be?
Okay.
Why should they be compulsorily pooled?
Because what happens
if they choose not to be?
Yeah. Well, the problem is, 2 or 3 years later, this group of people, all of whom were healthy, show up with a couple of AIDS
But you're
cases.
underestimating. Excuse me, but you're underestimating the foresight of people. People don't just look at 1 year. People do all sorts of things in which they provide for contingencies. Now, everybody knows that if he signs up for this, he's guaranteed renewal for X years or whatever it may be, and that if he isn't guaranteed that another plan which offers it cheap doesn't guarantee renewal.
Well, right now, actually, most people are not guaranteed renewal, and that is one of the big...
Of course not, because there's Uncle Sam standing there.
Well, in fact, that's one of the proposed legislative reforms, is to require guaranteed renewal. But guaranteed renewal by itself, I'm afraid, wouldn't be good enough to solve the problem, because if, you know, they'll say, sure, we'll renew your policy, but we're going to increase the price by a factor of 10.
You see, the thing that always amazes me about the kind of discussion you're engaging in, we have mountains of experience that writing a law, that good people writing a good law, does not mean that a good law will end up, that it will end up as a good law.
Milton, I'm not advocating that particular law.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just saying that is, I'm offering as evidence that there is guaranteed renewal today, that one of the big reform proposals is to require guaranteed
But
renewal.
all you want is for people to have the options. You want the market to provide them a maximum of options. And I'm saying if the consideration you're mentioning is an important one, I'm not saying it isn't, well then I believe it will be in the self-interest of insurance companies or other groups to offer those options.
No, I think what's happening is more and more insurers are doing several things. One is they differentiate the product. They produce a great variety of different health insurance contracts in order to differentiate the product, that is to make it hard for people to make price comparisons, to segment markets. There's one policy for the people who want mental health, another policy for the people who want eyeglasses and so forth, to obviate price competition for a package of comprehensive services. And so they segment markets, they differentiate products, and they select risks.
Am I wrong that in many states have regulations about the minimum provisions that have to be included in health insurance?
Yes, most states have laws about that. Unfortunately, those laws have become perverted, as you would expect.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say.
That the provider interests, you know, the people who do creative dance therapy want to require that creative dance therapy. There's a state, I understand, in which pastoral counseling has to be included in the insured benefit package. And that's why I would like to find...
Don't you think it'd be better off if you didn't have any of those laws?
Those laws, yes, right.
But I think now that's I would like to find some... Stop you for a moment. We agree we'd be better off those laws. You really think if you and I could sit down and write some laws that we'd have a ghost of a chance of having them adopted in a way in which they wouldn't be corrupted the same way?
No. Well, I don't know. No, I've developed some market reform proposals that are being worked out in a legislative form now. And while I'm not too comfortable with some of the changes that get made in the legislative slaughterhouse, I have some hope that maybe something better than what we have now will follow. Although I grant your point, that is, when the legislators, sometimes I feel like I sent you back there in Washington to design for a beautiful airplane. First thing that happened when it got there is somebody said, well, we like your design, but we want to take off the left wing.
Right, right, exactly.
And I said, wait, it won't fly.
And after it gets through the law, it gets in the hands of the administrators.
But let me come back to, I just want to recognize about the employment basis of health insurance. While I agree that it's got a lot wrong with it, it does some things that are valuable that I would like to see vested in some institutions. Let's say at Stanford with our 10,000 employees. Okay, we have a benefits office and a benefits committee. We study different contracts and decide what is a sensible contract, that'll protect people, because most people don't have time to become experts on it, so we'll share our expertise with our colleagues. We pre-select several competing options. We spread risks over our group, that is, each health plan charges the same premium to every member of the group, and in effect we make them compete on price. That is, we don't let them differentiate the product by, this one has eyeglasses but no hearing aids, this one has hearing aids but no glasses, and so forth. We say, we want a standard product, and because we want to make you compete on price, because we think all this stuff costs too much, and we want to put maximum pressure on you to get your price down.
Well, let's see.
So,
suppose Stanford was not responsible for paying for health care.
Right.
Almost every one of those things you're talking about, it would be possible to do independently.
By some other institution?
No. Stanford could do it. There's no reason. Stanford has other things that its faculty is organized to do.
Yeah.
I know that there are some universities which provide advice about where you should send your children to school.
Well, what I'm worried about is I think this goes beyond just information and advice. I think it
sure does.
You know.
That's what I don't like.
Okay. Well, I guess, I'm looking for ways of getting maximum incentives for efficiency and economy, but trying to recognize that there is a kind of collective desire for some risk spreading.
But I beg your pardon, I believe that I want to emphasize personal responsibility, individual responsibility for oneself and for one's family.
Well, my model has that.
With as much risk sharing as individuals separately believe they should buy.
Well, would you deal with the problem through long-term contracts then? I mean, if I now...
If long-term contracts are what people want to buy, fine. I don't want to legislate it.
Yeah. Let me just say, this is a market in which it's very difficult to create long-term contracts because medical technology changes. In fact, one of our big problems is it's been very difficult to create enforceable contracts at all. One of the big problems that's going on these days
Well, of course, the litigation problem is a separate problem. I always think of the case of malpractice insurance, which has become something of a scam. And what's really involved in malpractice insurance is that the physician or the hospital is selling the patient two goods. He's selling the patient medical care, and he's selling the patient a lottery ticket. People always complain about how much malpractice insurance adds to the cost of doing medicine. Insofar as it leads to preventive tests and so on, it does. But otherwise, it's just the administrative costs. The rest, it's a lottery. Some people get it. Now, it's always seemed to me that a physician ought to be able to say to his patient, look, I have two fees. I'm going to separate these two elements.
Right.
If you will sign a statement releasing me from responsibility, your fee will be X. If you want to keep the possibility, if you want to buy the lottery ticket, in other words, your fee will be higher.
You'll share in my malpractice insurance premium.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the only problem with that is that no courts today would enforce it.
Well, exactly.
50 years ago, they would have enforced it.
Right.
There's been the change in the litigation explosion and the change in the legal treatment of liability insurance, which I think has been a very bad thing, which makes such an agreement unenforceable in the courts.
Well,
and I wonder how many of these contracts that you're talking about are unenforceable for that reason, and how many for perfectly valid reasons.
Well, let's see. You got me. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, but that's really a problem.
Yeah.
Because, of course, these problems all get intertwined.
Right.
And what are they? What is it that they're intertwined into? Because that sets a background. We've been having a movement away from individual responsibility to social responsibility.
Sure. Yeah.
That movement reached its peak in countries like Russia and China. We're heading in that direction. We're only partway there. We're only halfway there. But I shudder when I think of the ultimate consequences of continuing to move in that direction. You cannot,
well, Milton,
obviously you can't separate out medicine from the whole society.
But I don't think we're disagreeing on that. I mean, the kind of reforms I'm proposing and designing are trying to roll back in the direction of increased, I talk about the need for informed, responsible choice, a price-conscious choice. Everybody has to bear the economic consequences of their choices and be rewarded for making the most economical. But it's in the context of a model that I think might actually be politically feasible.
Well, I'm just trying to urge you to be a little more radical.
Be more radical, right.
To extend your vision of what's politically feasible, because I'm not thinking of this solely in terms of medicine. I believe there is a movement building in this country which is reacting strongly against the trend we're developing. I think the Perot phenomenon was a manifestation of that phenomenon. Perot himself would have gone in the opposite direction. He was a big government man. He wasn't a personal responsibility man, despite all his rhetoric. But the attempt, the desire by people all over to find some movement in that direction. So I think that there is, I don't think we're going to continue heading in this direction. And I think in area after area, we ought to try to think somewhat more radically in the direction of how we can provide mechanisms or ways of movement or ways of thinking